because we're going in 6, 7, 8. Hey, everybody. This is the Smart and Public podcast. It's a podcast that talks about life and, business and careers all through the eyes of communications and PR pros. I'm Katie Boyson.
I'm Katie Duffy.
Today we have a guest on the show, someone that is very near and dear to our heart. Her name is Corina Standiford. If you haven't met her, she is the VP of Communications at Elemental Impact. We worked with her long ago in a previous life at Salesforce. And Corina, just welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you on and talk about everything that you've been doing.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, Corina, tell us first, we're going to start from the very top. Tell us a little bit, maybe start with Elemental Impact, what you're doing there, and then kind of how you got there, what that looks like in your career.
Absolutely. It's so good to see you both. So yeah, I'm VP of Comms at Elemental Impact. We're a nonprofit investor. We invest in climate technology across sectors, so energy, industry, food and ag. And we have a really interesting model where we get government and philanthropic funding to be able to invest. So they invest in us, and then we invest in these entrepreneurs and technologies. And then when we get returns in that, it comes back to the nonprofit. We recycle that capital so we can go invest into more technology. So it kind of accelerates. We also have a sister fund called Earthshot Ventures. It's a typical VC fund, so like returns focused, but it also is has an emphasis in climate, energy, AI a lot now too, kind of this bigger why now on the technologies. So I started in January. I came from Google, where I led sustainability and climate and energy comms for about 3 years. And before that, I was at Salesforce with you lovely ladies. And that's really where I got into sustainability. I started doing the partner ecosystem comms, and then I moved over to support Salesforce Ventures, the corporate venture arm, M&A, and then I did sustainability and philanthropy. And so it was during that time that I got into climate, got into sustainability. And before that, I did a bunch of different industries and sectors. And I was always kind of master of all, not of one. And it was the first time that I really loved the space I was working in for comms. And I also liked the VC space too, like the entrepreneur, the Salesforce Ventures stuff I did. And so I was at Salesforce for about 5 years, got to learn a lot. It was when Salesforce was really focused on sustainability work and made the net zero commitment, rolled out net zero cloud. And so I was able to help build that program and comms. And so when I discovered that love, then there was a role open at Google, and that's why I moved over and to take that.
I feel like the M&A, Salesforce Ventures, and then going into sustainability is kind of like the mash of what you're doing now.
Exactly. That's why when I found this role, I was like, what? How is it all the things that I have loved? And the interesting thing too is the nonprofit. So we're for about 40 people, so it's much smaller. But our ecosystem is so large because we're investing, because we're working with hundreds of entrepreneurs all the time. And so it's that scale has been interesting shift for me, but it's also I've loved being able to really hone in on these key areas that I can focus in on and become more of an expert in.
Yeah. And I want to ask you a bunch about Climate Week and communications theme. But maybe let's just kind of start out what it was like on the ground this year, considering everything that's happening with our government. What was the vibe like? What were you seeing, and what was kind of the underlying theme at Climate Week?
Yeah, so Climate Week was earlier September, New York Climate Week. It's the same week as United Nations General Assembly, so UNGA. So it's an interesting place to be because it's all climate all the time, but then there's also this layer of a lot of politicians and other political happenings going on. And so this year was interesting because it was the biggest climate week there's ever been. There's thousands of people, more convenings than any previous year, which is exciting because there's been a lot of rollback and pullback in the US, specifically on the policy side with climate. And so it felt like a moment where people were we're going to step up, we're going to show up, we're going to come, we're going to try to find solutions and collaborate despite everything else that's going around and the noise. So it was a really energizing week that way, like a lot of connections. And Trump spoke on this floor on Tuesday, and he made comments about climate change being a con job and a green scam in front of like all the world leaders and everybody. So I went to a New York Times climate event the next day, and that was like all the questions for the panelists were like, what is your reaction to Trump? What do you think that's
Mhm.
how that's gonna impact? So it was this like really polarizing kind of experience where it was like a lot of goodness and innovation and excitement, and then this like kind of heavier piece of it with like this big challenge ahead of how we move forward.
Do you feel like it creates more swirl or more focus when you have that type of that energy?
It's such a good question because I think both actually. And I say that because when I went to the New York Times climate event afterwards, I just got a little bit frustrated. I wrote in my notebook, I'm like, we keep talking about the same things, you know, it's like it felt like we're just swirling around this like Trump piece. Then there's like this moment where it's like, okay, we can't like keep focusing on this. We need to actually figure out how we're moving forward. So every question to the panelists were, you know, what do you think about Trump's comments? And it's like, oh my gosh, can we talk about something else? But I think it's kind of like you have to ask it, you have to acknowledge it, and then it's like, okay, let's move on. And there was a speaker there. She is a CEO for SE for All. She's from Nigeria, and she just has this different perspective. And she got asked the question. She was like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, let's move on. Let's get over it. Let's just like keep focused on what we're doing. And it was like refreshing because just people get caught up in it, you know?
You were talking about the thing that you were scribbling down in your notebook. Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit more too, just about like what you were frustrated about and why you wrote that down?
I I just feel like from a comms perspective, like we need to change the narrative a little bit. We keep talking to ourselves, we keep talking in circles on the same topics. How are we going to make progress on that? And there's like a lot of talk about narrative versus truths too. So, what's your narrative and what's true? I think the Republicans are winning on a narrative that's not true. And we keep trying to fight it with truth. And not to not be honest, but it's like how do you
Yeah.
work that narrative in the truth that's compelling enough? And especially in the climate space, it's a lot about science and data points, which is all so important. But then I think sometimes it gets lost and it gets like a little bit wonky. So I just like it like sparked something in me of like, how can we get more creative in how we talk about things and how we communicate and who we're talking to?
That
Yeah,
was
I
going to be
just
my question because, like, I sometimes feel with some of this debate, there's a portion of the community that maybe will never win over. Um, but then it's like, who do we need to win over? And then what's going to resonate with them? And I mean, we're seeing similar things, maybe not at this extreme, but definitely in Australia, we have politicians on the right calling it out as, you know, maybe not as far as a con job, but like alluding to the fact that they don't believe that this is real. And then we have a government in power that luckily does. But I think we're seeing this play out in a lot of markets is this idea of just saying it's not real. And then you've got the climate side using science, using facts, but that doesn't seem to be resonating. So it's just I think it's a really interesting challenge and then it goes back to yeah, like who needs to believe it and act on it?
yeah.
And in your case like you need funding, you need, you know, investment. So yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, I've been trying to challenge my team on more of the like creative storytelling and like so Elemental invests a lot in first of a kind technologies, so really early stage that are and a lot of the climate tech is like steel in the ground, like hardware, like not software. So you need certain kind of capital to invest in that. So you can't actually, it's not effective to take a bunch of venture dollars because then you're spending that money on something that's like more hardware and it doesn't give the right returns, right? But it's a complicated topic and it's like financial and like process driven. And so it took a step back when I came here, and it was like, how can we tell this story that appeals to philanthropic donors and appeals to entrepreneurs that like want to show the technology that they're building? So we did this, like, we did a campaign called the First of a Kind Next to Scale, and it's all about like the first like plane to fly, and then the electric plane in Hawaii, or like, you know, the first car, now it's all electric. So it's like showing the like trying to really story tell around what these technologies are doing and where we're going, and making it really visual, and like good music to our video, and like, you know, so
Right.
it's like you kind of have to do both and do them both really well.
Yeah. And when we talk about the swirl, like part of me thinks that's sort of Trump's MO is to create swirl, versus kind of, and just sort of almost distract from the actual problem at hand or discussion at hand. But has some of that swirl genuinely impacted investment dollars
Mhm.
conversation? Like, do you feel like it is? I mean, and we've seen this in somewhat the corporate space in companies sort of winding back that focus on sustainability. But what are you seeing from both an investment and dollars, but also like that corporate landscape of caring about this issue?
Yeah. It's been interesting over even just from the last 9 months what has happened, because I think through the IRA, and there was a lot of government grants that were being given out to solar projects, to wind projects, to like all sorts of climate tech, that it was really impactful for communities. It's not just about reducing emissions, it's lowering energy bills, it's making your water cleaner, like really good stuff for the community. And the government's rolled back a lot of those grants and stalled them. And so there's this gap that philanthropy can't fully fill, right? Like that was millions of dollars that the government had passed and distributed. So it is a challenge, but it's also, I think, ignited new creativity and understanding the importance of collaboration in a way that's really surgical, that like you can figure out really good ways to make progress that benefit both. The other interesting thing about climate change is there's a lot of issues that philanthropy is trying to fund right now, like education and healthcare, that are all having impacts. But climate change impacts all of those also. So if you look at like, if you can see the value in funding technology that's trying to accelerate climate action, you're also going to have better, cleaner food. You're going to have healthier water. You're going to have, you know, cooler schools in really hot areas for kids. So, yeah, we just are having to get creative about how we do it. And we do that in storytelling too, about being really specific on the benefits that we're seeing. And it's not trying to be really smart about how we talk about it.
There's a benefit of talking about it like tech as well.
Mhm.
So I think that thinking one report that I saw that you guys did was the scale gap, and like talking about what that looks like from a manufacturing standpoint, and where solar companies, for example, the scale would stop because there was this like new technology that needed to be manufactured and it's never been manufactured before, like what that looks like. And I thought that that was really smart in trying to put it in terms like the manufacturing piece, where we can do this domestically, but there's a scale gap. We need to have new types of education and funding to be able to produce this type of domestic solar power. Like, I just
Yeah.
thought that that was a really clever way of
Mhm.
positioning that entire report.
Thanks. Yeah, we talk about it, the scale gap. We quantified it with BCG. It's more than $150 billion that need to come into this scale gap. So it's like the early technologies, and then it's this commercialization journey that they're needing to go on until they can scale and become, you know, profitable, and a lot of people using them. And so it's like we are really focused on that. But it takes a lot of different players. Like when I was at Google, Google plays such a huge role in being a corporate buyer for these technologies. So Fervo, a geothermal company who's now, you know, has scaled a lot and doing really well. Google was the first buyer of Fervo for a pilot project in Nevada. Elemental has also invested in Fervo. So that's kind of a cool circle. But it's like all these different players need to come together to make that work. And then you need to be able to talk about that in a way that is understandable so more people can come in and help do that.
One thing that I also found really interesting when I was working with my solar client was this like list of no words, especially as we're thinking about if you have a solar client or an energy company that you're working with and you're trying to continue to get funding or grants or anything that you have to have some kind of collaboration with the government, there's this list of words that you should never use in comms, because it triggers, the Republican Party. And so I just found that really interesting. Like I like can't say climate change. Everybody knows that. Like you're not allowed to say that anymore. But just what other ways in terms of getting creative, or like what does the no list look like for you? And like how do
Really
you
long. It's very
Very
long.
long.
It's hard to communicate in this. No, I mean, it's climate change, it's energy transition, it's green energy, it's environmental justice. It's like all of these words that you're not supposed to say anymore. And we went through a really interesting exercise in the beginning of the year to review all of our content and see which words were we using. Is there a different way we can say this by still getting the same message across? And looking at words that do resonate, like energy abundance, domestic manufacturing, like all of the above, right? But I'll go back to saying like it's actually been a really interesting comms experiment to be really specific on how we're talking. And so, I've been in this space now for quite a while, and it's like reduce emissions, sustainability, climate change, like all these things is like, what does that actually mean? And so we work with companies that we're trying to really explain what they do and the benefits they have. So we work with this company called Nitricity. They do organic fertilizer, and they work with a bunch of folks in Delhi, California, so Central California. And so we're talking about like the jobs they're creating, like how it's economic value for this smaller town, so it's like looking at other benefits and these co-benefits. That's like how you get this moving, and you get, Kitty, to your point of like those people that are kind of on the fence, or how you're trying to talk to them. It's more of this co-benefits. What's in it for me? Like, what is it doing for my family or my day to day, right? um and really trying to hone in on that.
And I think it's a good comms lesson regardless. Like, it's sad that we are at that place where some of these words we can't use, but I think the creativity and the push to make it more real for people is
Yes.
not a bad thing. And I think if every industry needs to be thinking about that, because I think people are living in this time where they're very zeroed in on like my immediate world, cost of living, all of this stuff. So it's like quite a good exercise anyway, regardless, I think, to go. And it's similar in defense, particularly in a market like Australia. It's like, why should Australians care? Like we feel safe, people love their life, that what they care about, right? So it's like trying to figure out, and I think that exercise, even for tech, it was like, enterprise tech, who cares about a CRM, really? But like, who's the end user? Why is it going to be, all of that stuff. So I think it's, for comms people, it's a good reminder to like be thinking about that always. And then unfortunately for you, it's like just a forcing function that it has to happen in this space now in the current.
I feel like climate is one of those things where if you get it, you're on board, or if you don't get it, like there's a huge mountain of convincing to climb, like to get this person across the line. I just feel like maybe it's signaling that there's like a reputation or some kind of barrier that's happening within the climate storytelling world.
So we look at it kind of across the spectrum. There's people, to your point, that are really into it, that care, like the entrepreneurs we're working with. They want to work with us because they're building technology that helps accelerate climate action, and they're thinking about that day in and day out. But then we have some of our donors that don't necessarily get it or understand the benefit of it, or they really, we have a big impact and community lens too, and so there's also the added layer of um, communicating how the technology we're investing in is actually making community impact too, so not just for the environment but for the community. And so you're just having to, like, we have our set of core talking points and core messaging, which I think all comms people have, and then it's how you adjust that and make it specific for the different audiences that you're talking to. And I mean, we're in a good place where we're not trying to convert somebody all the way over here, right, in a sense. But it also, with the policy changing, a lot of the grants were being given to red states and making progress there. And now they don't have that funding and they're seeing the impacts of that. And so we have projects all over the US. So looking at certain cities or, states that we could maybe accelerate something in, like Texas that, is a red state, but they're really like have a lot of energy projects and like
Yeah.
trying to accelerate that. So like looking at maybe those that are kind of on the track a little bit too. So yeah, it just kind of depends on what message you're trying to get across and what you're trying to land.
Where are you seeing, and I know you kind of predominantly focused on the US, but where do you see this conversation being less controversial? Are there any markets that you think it's like just kind of, I mean, I have some in my head that I would imagine it is easier to tell this story, but like where are you seeing that, or are you seeing that at all from a global perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Europe is really much more climate friendly. At Google, we hosted this annual sustainability event, and we historically did it in the US. And the last year I was there, we ended up doing it in Brussels because it's like, more of a friendly environment to climate. I do like China is becoming a clean energy, powerhouse. But I think they're doing it a lot because it is a good economic investment too, right?
Absolutely.
So I think it's like people that are understanding that. I mean, I think Australia, New Zealand, there's actually Andrew Forrest, who's one of like a really well-known Australian
Yes.
businessman. He was speaking at the
Yeah.
New York Times event and his comment after the Trump piece, he's like, it really breaks my heart to hear your leader saying this. He's like, I go at the Great Barrier Reef and it's gone. It's not coming back in the way it was. Like he was so emotional and so I think that like globally it's it is a world problem. It's not just a US problem, climate change. So
Yeah.
like if others are continuing and see the truth in that, like that says a lot. And we're also thinking like from a comm standpoint, how do we like tap into entrepreneurs in
Yeah.
Europe? Or like how do we
Yeah.
expand maybe the market and where we're operating in to reach others that are more like supportive of what we're doing.
And that's the other piece of extending that reach, because I feel like climate change is such a hot button topic. Like people get so wound up and passionate about it that I feel like it almost makes people talk in an echo chamber to the same people. Like it's almost like, well, it's just better to talk about the topics with people that agree with you, but you're really not expanding out and like educating people because it's just actually so exhausting to talk to somebody else about climate change that is like on the other side of the hill. So I just feel like that's such a huge challenge, or that would be a huge challenge that you would see in climate communications, is like getting your executives or even, your portfolio company founders or whatever to go outside and speak to press that might have like a different opinion, or go to a country and go to a conference that, doesn't have as much support.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I think I'm struggling with that more in my current role because it's all climate all the time. When I was at Google and Salesforce, we armed other spokespeople that weren't in the climate space or not the chief sustainability officer to talk about some of our climate initiatives. Or there's things like efficiencies in the data center chips that Google Cloud uses in their data centers. So they're like technical engineers are talking about that, right? And so that's reaching a different audience. So I feel like we could do that and there was more conversations going on. And so it's something that I'm kind of struggling with of like, how do we do that in my current role? And do we need to do that with the audiences we're reaching, right? It's not our job to convince everybody of climate change necessarily, but
Mm.
it's how do we reach those that we need to reach within what we're trying to accomplish?
What about the media landscape? Has there been, I mean, clearly there's beat reporters, but has that shrunk? Are
It
you
has
finding it
shrunk.
harder? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, it has shrunk. It's been interesting for me on a like career perspective, because when I started at Salesforce, there's more and more climate reporters popping up, and it was like every day there was another sustainability reporter at like a big newspaper. And it was really exciting because we could, go to a bunch of different people, build relationships. And when I got to Google, it was like I had those relationships, and it was, everybody wanted to hear what Google was doing. So it was really fun to continue to build on those relationships and like work with them on what stories are interesting and resonating. And now it's definitely like newspapers and outlets have let climate reporters go, or some have totally shut down, like Cypher, which is part of Breakthrough, Bill Gates. They shut down recently. And so, yeah, there definitely is a shift. And to your point on like audience and how do you reach a broader audience, I'm trying to think about what other reporters that maybe are tech reporters that might be interested, or like they report on food and ag, or they report on, like that you could get into in a different way that's more industry specific, that maybe isn't a climate reporter, but they care about the certain industry or technology that we're investing in.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we're seeing that in general, in terms of the media. Are there any reporters that are kind of spinning off and doing their own thing, like in this space, like creating Substacks, or kind of like, are you seeing any of that happen if they're kind of being let go from a major paper?
Yeah, I am seeing that. I'm also seeing podcasts. Like there's certain people that are starting podcasts. One of the reporters at Cypher, she just started her own. I'm also just really interested in like the creator community. At Google, we did a lot with creators, and it's a bit more like pay for play for, the bigger ones, but thinking about different mediums or areas that we could tap into that's maybe not as traditional media, that like Substack, podcasts, or creators. And in my role, I oversee all the branding and marketing events too. And so thinking about how they all play together, right? Like historically, my career has been media, PR, but now I'm looking at kind of a broader landscape. And it's been really interesting to think about, okay, maybe there's less climate reporters, but leaning into owned and being really creative in that way might work really well in this moment. Or how do we create really interesting convenings that aren't necessarily like our big annual event all the time, but like brings people together to have interesting conversations. And we do these like live deal rooms, so we invite different kinds of investors like VC and philanthropy, and bring in an entrepreneur, and they talk about the challenge that they're having, and then all the investors like chime in on how they would invest. And so trying to like create interesting moments together, and thinking of different ways in than traditional media.
How do you think about, from an event standpoint, like a sustainable event? Like, what does that look like from a footprint perspective?
I know it's we think about it a lot in like what we can recycle, or like what materials we use. We don't bring in a lot of like things you can get rid of, right? We do like reusable totes, or we ask people to bring their own water bottles, like that kind of thing. Elemental is actually based in Hawaii. Our CEO is there. That's where our headquarters are. And we had an event out there, and they have this like venison that's from Hawaii that's really like sustainable and natural, so that like they serve that at every meal. It's like, so trying to look at like different ways to do it that brings.
You have to get creative, because
you have to be conscious.
People are a dumpster.
Yes. Oh, all the time. I know. In my personal life, I'm like, oh wait, I need to like do this. But
I know. It's hard when you actually start to think about it. Like Scotty's sister and her husband like built a sustainable home, and like they're super into that. And I'm really like, it's really fascinating the way that they look at reusing things and what they actually consume. And I find it so interesting, but I find it really exhausting, like to be thinking about it all the time like that.
I know, because it's not easy, it's like, oh, I'm just going to go on Amazon and buy something else and then return it. And then like, but I'm trying to be better about that, and like clothes, like recycle clothes and stuff, like use those platforms and stuff. But it's not like the immediate thing you think about. Like you want your life easy, and that's not always the case.
Are you afraid to like misstep when you're in your work environment, like around that?
Yeah, like use the wrong bin.
Yes, like I feel like I would be on eggshells
Yeah.
around just all the
Yeah,
time.
totally. I know whenever I forget my water bottle and I'm like, I have a plastic thing, I'm like trying to
Yeah.
hide it or like, it's like just trying to be aware. I'm like, oh man, I don't think anybody like really
It's
does.
like you've got a Ziploc bag, you're like washing it out. You're like, I'll use
It
this
is that
I'm
again.
using it again.
reusable. Mhm. I'm gonna wash it. I do that. My husband makes it that, so it's we
My
do.
God. It's so
Yeah.
funny because I always just, you can tell I'm going off on a tangent now. My grandparents used to wash their Ziploc bags, but that's because they were like poor
From the
people from,
depression.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
my nana used to do stuff like that. It was not
it's
sustainability. It was like cost. It was like I lived through the depression. I'm going to be
cheaper.
careful with every dollar I
Yeah.
spend.
It's cheaper.
Yes.
That's
Maybe
the
there's something to
problem.
learn from that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. I try to like teach my kids to take care of the earth, which like that's another thing of like teaching future generations and like so they whenever they see trash, they're like, "Oh, the earth is sad." It's like they're trying, I want them to just be aware of that kind of stuff.
Cute.
So, uh, yeah.
I do feel like the next generation coming through, it is a little bit more like I think schools, I mean, in Australia particularly, I don't know about the US, but in Australia, I feel like they're doing a good job of integrating some of this stuff as just part of their school life. Like they have a veggie garden, they have chickens, they
Yes.
are really conscious of rubbish. Like I just feel like it seems quite organic to them, which definitely wasn't when I was growing up. And so I'm hoping that like that becomes just how they learn is it's not shoved down their throat. It's like this is just we have a veggie garden, we live, and not every
Yeah,
school has
it's
that. I
like
get
life.
that. I think they are
Yeah.
doing a better job, hopefully.
I have faith. I feel like the younger generations are gonna be good. But I just want everyone to stop blaming the millennials for everything. Like we have not actually done that. We are victims here, people.
Wait.
Okay, so just thinking about kind of everything that you saw based at Climate Week, like what, from a comms perspective, what's one major change that you think will reshape climate comms over the next 12 months? Like, what is your prediction? What do you see?
I think we have gotten over a hump where a lot of people have been scared to say stuff and get out and like push back. And I hope and I'm going to push my team to like just be a bit bolder in what we're doing and what we are convicted about and the progress we're making and just like own that story a little bit more and like do it in a smart way. But I think that like that in the climate community, I'm just like feeling that kind of bubbling up of like feeling just ready to go again. Like we kind of the dust has settled. We kind of know what we're working with. Like, okay, let's go. And like be able to still talk about this important stuff and like not feel like we have to be shy about what we're doing because it's really good, it's impactful, it's creative, and it's and I think again like the other players coming together to do that, so like the big corporates and the big funders and like people taking a stance to do that and supporting this work.
And for somebody that wants to go into climate comms, like what would you recommend they do now so that they can get in?
If you're interested in it, I would find different avenues to try to get experience, whether you're at a big tech company, like try to get, if you're in comms, try to get on the account that is more around sustainability impact, or same with an agency. I think talk to people in the industry and just do some networking with entrepreneurs or leaders in the space, or reach out to me and talk to me about it. But I think that there's a lot of startups that are interested in hiring comms professionals that maybe are even more junior that want to get their foot in the door. So maybe look in those areas, but start reading about like what they're writing about, what is being covered in the climate space. And yeah, it's important to get into.
I imagine policy potentially like government comms. I don't know. I made that up in my
Not
head.
now. Maybe not now.
Except for they have one person now and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe in a few years. That would
I
be
think
Bad
if
recommendation.
you're at the very early stages of your career, like think about wherever you're working, if it's an agency or if you're in-house, like if there isn't a sustainability program or group or like that's, you can also start that for your agency, for your, and even if that's just for your own business, is like, if you're interested in it, demonstrate some capability or some interest, then I think that will naturally start to evolve into different places. And then to your point, Corrine, I think if you're in a big corporate, find out like who sits in that space, what are we doing in that space, like go and investigate that as a starting point. I think is but like with anything, yeah, I would say read, like learn about it, show interest in it, and it'll naturally, you'll find a spot in the space.
Yeah. I also think there's like LinkedIn and places like that you can find communities. There's a lot of groups there that I've discovered. And so if there's ways to get connected there too, with just like-minded people within the comm space.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So not government then. I mean, stick with me for more career tips, everyone. Corina, thank you.
Maybe government around the world, like to do something abroad, like go and study in Brussels.
I was going to say, if you are
move to Brussels,
if you're listening from Brussels, start with government.
Shout out to our listeners in Brussels.
It's also, it's like, what's the other? It's like Finland.
I was going to say any of the Nordics. I feel like would be a safe space.
Yeah, you're safe there.
Yeah, exactly. Corina, thank you so much for joining us on the pod today. Obviously, it's so great just to catch up and kind of see your face, but I think that, sustainability is such an important conversation, particularly around comms, where everything is so polarized and everything is so nuanced, and so many barriers. So your experience is so valuable. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'll just say too, like I said, I was a generalist and then honed in on this. I think just taking the leap and trying something that you care about and, like being able to say yes and try it. And I've really loved it. And that's not to say like, maybe I will go back later or, but like being able to hone in and become a subject matter expert has been really fun too.
Yeah. Take the punt. Life is short.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, one more question for you. Do you want to tell us how you're dumb in private, Corina?
Yes. Okay, so I asked my husband this question and he was like, well, I'm just genuinely confused how you've gotten this far in life. Because I'm just like, I'm like, okay, that's great. But I think like in my private life, I don't do my research as much. I just make an assumption and I'm like, that's right. Like that's truth. And so I'll give you a couple examples. One, I thought narwhals were a magic character creation for the longest time. And my daughter Abby is obsessed with narwhals. She has a narwhal backpack. She has a narwhal like pillow. And I just like kept talking to her about how they're these magical beings.
These beautiful mystical creatures.
Mystical creatures. And I mentioned this like a year ago and my husband was like, they're real. That is a real animal. Like, and I had gone years like thinking that this is like, they're like a unicorn. And my daughter was like pretty bummed because she had all made up all these like ideas in her head. So that's one. Another one, we host au pairs and we had our first one. She's from Colombia, speaks Spanish. And I was like, okay, I really want another Spanish speaker. So like my girls can keep learning Spanish. I interviewed like 20 plus au pairs. And I found one I loved, and I told my husband this is why he's confused about me. But I was like, I found this one. I love her. She's from Brazil. She's gonna like
knew it.
Like, and he was like, "Didn't you want a Spanish speaker?" I'm like, "Yeah, she speaks Spanish. Like, what? Do you, like, they speak Portuguese." I'm like, oh man.
I had a feeling you were gonna say that.
Yeah, me too. I was waiting for the like, oh, who's it gonna be? Yeah.
So I have multiple examples of those, but I just lived with this truth for so long and then realized that I'm very
I feel like it is a common theme of this podcast that we put all our energy into being great at work, and then we just lose it. It just goes at home and we just fly through life. My husband would say the exact same thing about me. He does not know how I've adulted for this long and survived.
Yeah. Also, like, how are you in comms? You can't speak. Like, you don't even come up with the right words. I'm like, what's that thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
I get that from Scott so much of like the don't you speak for a living kind of like, that's not how you use that word, Katie. And I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, oh my God. Well, thank you so much for joining us again. We are just so grateful to have you as a friend and then a friend of the pod and then also just on the pod. It's an inception of
So
gratefulness.
happy to be on the pod.
And if anyone else has a recommendation or a topic or anything they want us to cover, please reach out to us at hello@smartandpublicpod.com, or you can find us on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube at Smart and Public Pod. But other than that, we will talk to you guys next time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.